Well, hello, and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Glad to be with you today. We are getting into Proverbs chapter 14, as it is the 14th of December, 2022. And we only got a couple more weeks here in 2022 before we jump into next year. But today we're coming at you with Proverbs chapter 14, and there's some verses we want to highlight, and our main feature verse is found in chapter 14 verse 30, and it says, a tranquil or content heart gives life to our flesh, but envy makes our bones rot. And this is our big feature verse, our concept for today's video, is this idea that when we live a content life, it actually brings life to us. And but if we live in an envious state, it corrupts our bones, it decays us, and it brings really corruption to our entire life, indicating the opposite of life to our flesh would be death to our flesh. And this is very different, I want to note, than the death to the flesh that is spoken about spiritually throughout the scriptures. This has to do with the health of our lives as opposed to the spiritual context of our flesh. And so when Solomon writes about the flesh in the book of Proverbs, it is very different than how we see the word flesh typically used throughout Scripture, which would have more of an indication of the perhaps corrupt or evil desires or selfish ambitions of our life as opposed to spiritual realities. And so just a notation to make there, that when Solomon says that a tranquil or content heart gives life to the flesh, he's not using the word in the same capacity as other biblical writers are. And that is unique to the book of Proverbs. Elsewhere, we can hold to this context and style of the word flesh, but here it's not what was indicated by the word used by Solomon. His big point, though, is that envy makes our bones rot. And in today and every culture that's ever existed, we are a people that like to become envious of those around us. We separate ourselves into the haves and the have-nots. We separate ourselves into different classes. We separate ourselves into different net worths and things, or people who have certain things, maybe a family, or maybe this or maybe that, or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, instead of living a content life, we live a life of envy or jealousy or striving in comparison to other people. Envious of things that someone has that we don't, or envious of how someone is that we're not. And I think there's some value in competition, but there is definitely a downside when we begin to allow that view of others greatly affect how we view ourselves. There is something that I like to teach my kids, and that I'm trying to learn in life as well. And it's like, I don't care if I win or lose as long as I've done my best. And it's like, hey, it doesn't matter if you beat daddy at checkers, you're 10, but as long as you've done your best, that's what we're striving for. And so that's something that I'm hoping to continuously apply to my own life as well, that when I see others maybe make it in some sort of viewpoint, beyond where I think I'm at, that I need to just sit back, assess, and say, hey, I'm giving it my best. I'm doing my best, and I want to be content with what I have so that I can live a joyous life, or a life, live in a way that brings life to me, as opposed to live in envy and greed and jealousy, which would bring death and make my bones rot. In verse 23, Solomon writes, in toil there is profit, but in mere talk tends to lead to poverty. And there's something valuable about this. How many times do you find yourself sitting there talking about what the Joneses have, talking about what you couldn't do? Oh man, if I was in my 20s, this is the way I would have done it. If I was in my 30s again, this is what I'd do. If I was doing, it's like, hey, you're not, just get up and do what you can now, is what Solomon says. He says that toiling, working hard, is better than idle and wishy-washy pie-in-the-sky talk. It's not doing anything useful. Get out there, do it. I have a sign in my office that I've hung up, and it simply reads this: nobody cares, work harder. And sometimes that's a little bit defeating, but other times it's exactly what I need to know. Nobody cares. Just work harder. It doesn't matter the words you're saying. They have value, but demonstrate things through your work. Toil leads to results. Flapping your lips tends to lead to poverty, is what Solomon says here. And when we live a life that is content, we work at it. And it actually brings joy and life to us. But when we live a life that is not content, we don't know what we need, we don't know what we have, we don't know what we will have or what we're anticipating having. We're just trying to keep up with those around us. It rots our very bones. In fact, in verse 14, Solomon says that the backslider in heart will be filled with the fruit of their ways, and a good man will be filled with fruit of their ways. It's going to come to pass what's going to happen, right? We're going to see the long-term effects of the small decisions we make daily. And when we've made our decisions based off of envy, we will see the long-term rot that exists in our life. And when we make our decisions based off of being content with what the Lord has given us, and that doesn't mean we don't strive and work hard. It means we recognize and live within the means that the Lord has given us relationally, mentally, spiritually, financially, physically, all the ways that will have fruit and life that reflects those simple decisions of contentment rather than decisions of envy. And it's like, at the end of the day, if you want a hot tub, find some friends with a hot tub and enjoy their hot tub and their friendship until you can get your own hot tub. Don't sit there in jealousy and not sit in someone else's hot tub and not build relationships at the same time. Because when you do get your hot tub, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I have lots of friends to share my hot tub with. I can be generous and I can be relational. But when we walk in envy instead of contentment, what we find is we actually decimate, destroy, and limit our ability to be relationally open and available to others, because all of a sudden what happens is I'm jealous of you and I'm envious of you. And I don't want to be around you anymore because it infuriates me that I don't have what you have. But it's like we might have different starting positions. We might have different places. We might be running at a different pace or able to move at a different pace. And that's just the reality of life. We need to stop comparing ourselves to where others are. We can look to see where others are and say, hey, I want to work hard to get to that point. But if we've limited our contentment with what we currently have and what we're capable of, then we're going to see our very bones rot from within us as time progresses. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is reckless and careless, is found in verse 16 of Proverbs 14. I read a crazy stat the other day that over $3 trillion were spent by Americans during the 2.5 years of COVID on get-rich-quick schemes. That's a lot of money, of personal, hard-earned, working hours, money spent into things that recklessly and foolishly people thought would get them to where the Joneses are. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil or reckless and careless things. Friends, I want to encourage you in a long path of obedience, in a long path in the same direction of following God, because a tranquil heart gives life to flesh, but envy makes the bones rot. We need to be people who understand what it means to be content, to have enough, to work hard, and not just have dreams that we speak about, but dreams that we work towards. And in the whole thing, be grateful for God for what he's given us and generous to those around us, that we might not become so dependent upon our personal security, but that we can actually demonstrate and relationally show the love of Jesus to others. Those are some of my thoughts from Proverbs 14. Go read it for yourself, read through, spend some time in prayer, and we will see you next week on the 21st for another Wisdom Wednesday. God bless.